We've seen several different guerrilla groups operate in this country, and we've seen what damage and fear they can bring into the country.
Sandhurst, 1975. A classroom lecture on urban guerrilla warfare, delivered by Patrick Mercer, aged 19, to his fellow students.
And can you see the point I'm trying to make? It can escalate so easily. The lines of supply, which people like the IRA use, people like the Anglo Brigade have used, can be tapped. And there are powers outside this country which are willing to let them be tapped, who will be glad to see insurgency, civil strife break out in this country.
To become a regular army officer these days, you must learn about subversion, politics and revolution, as well as acquiring the more traditional military skills.
Okay, thank you very much.
For a century and a half, the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst has produced the subalterns to officer and empire. But in the past few years, the British Army's role has changed radically, and with it the Sandhurst system. The young officer, who could once expect to serve in any continent of the world, can now look forward to the frontiers of Germany, the back streets of Belfast, or even the dustbins of Glasgow. Amid the 700 green acres of Surrey's military belt, the officers of tomorrow learn not only conventional warfare, but the counter-insurgency techniques of Sandhurst old boy Brigadier Frank Kitson. But they must first gain their commissions on a course that will sort out the gentlemen from the boys.
Well, that's my... Right, come on. Come on, push him up, that's it, good, well done. Well done! Push him up, grab him, come on! Grab the fucker! Just let him down. Let him go and run again. Let him go.
It's from the mouths of ungentle sergeants that the would-be officer receives his early training. After the first few months of Sandhurst, he's as fit as he'll ever be in his life. Only then can his platoon compete in the commandant's steeplechase.
Come on, get up there, Mr. McCullough. Mr. McCullough, dress right back, sir, and take a good hard run at it. It's the only way you'll get up here. One.
Come on, Pyman, concentrate.
No. Right, now dig in when you hit it. That's it, now pull him up. That's it. Come on, one more. Push! That's the way, now you're going to dig the toes in. Push! Hey, come on! Come on, Mike, come on, let's go! Come on!
I hated it, every minute of it, until you crossed the finishing line, and the feeling then was absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely shattered, but really pleased that I'd managed to complete that course with my platoon.
We had one chap who was absolutely useless, and he went on the course, and he dropped out a third of the way round, and we carried him for another third, and then he more or less died. You know, just collapsed in a heap of mud. So we had to leave him, we couldn't drag him round.
Sandhurst has been teaching suffering for generations. On their farewell night, members of the class of 75 recall the year that has made them into army officers. Among them, Charles Gray, the son of a retired major, Andrew Simpkin, a former regular soldier and the son of a grocer, and Patrick Mercer, the son of the Bishop of Exeter. He remembers the first day.
I jumped in the car with the chauffeur and we came up. And I had an immense leather trunk, absolutely huge. And I got out of the car and the chauffeur picked it up and brought it to the door. There was a sort of bull-like grenadier guardsman standing there. And he looked at the chap carrying the case and I said, good afternoon, Colour. He said, my name's Staff, and you can put that bleeding case down because it's the last time I'm going to have a case carried for you for the next 6 months. Oh dear, it was really rather bad the first few days.
Strong.
You lay your kit down there, sir, please. If you say your farewells to your parents, etc.
Sandhurst still looks like an elegant finishing school for the younger sons of gentlemen. But now, instead of a leisurely 2-year course, officers are turned out in 6 months flat. And in the past few years, the place has gone comprehensive after a fashion. Most cadets used to come from public schools and old army families. Now, nearly 2/3 are from state schools.
Right, come on inside, sir.
While the new cadets' first encounter is with the sergeants from the Guards, their parents take tea with the Commandant of Sandhurst, Major General Robert Ford. General Ford came to take charge of the Sandhurst reforms from one of the most sensitive posts in the British Army. For 2 years until 1973, he was commander of land forces in Northern Ireland during Bloody Sunday in Londonderry and the army occupation of the no-go areas, Operation Motorman. Although the lessons of Ulster are now an essential part of Sandhurst training, the course still starts in the traditional manner.
My father, he went to tea in the commandant. I was shown upstairs by this Irish Guard colour sergeant, and, you know, you wonder what's hit you, quite frankly.
Book in here, state your name to the lady there, she'll check you off and give you an identification tag.
Yes. Go and get your haircut, sir. And, you know, every time you spoke to them, or even sometimes when you didn't speak to them, they said, get your haircut.
Right, come with me then, sir, and I'll show you.
Latvia or Lithuania when the Allied and the Bolsheviks. What's he aiming to go into himself?
QH.
QH?
No.
Ah, another cameraman, I see.
Yes.
Everybody had to go and have it cut. And as soon as you had your hair cut, and it really was a pretty brutal cut, there was a feeling of uniformity, no matter how horrid. At least you all had the same length hair.
The newly uniformed cadets await their first sight of the commandant, who's a veteran not just of Ulster, but of Palestine and Normandy.
Field Marshal Montgomery once said, "You'll never be able to command and control soldiers until you've learned to command and control yourself." And this means putting the standards which you know to be right before your own comfort and convenience. And I'm sure you all understand that.
Although General Ford has experienced the newest and nastiest forms of urban warfare, the qualities he seeks in his young men are the most traditional.
Competitiveness and team spirit are both fundamental in our lives as soldiers. Competitiveness encourages us to achieve much greater results together than its members could ever achieve as a collection of individuals. You'll certainly find that your life here for the next few weeks will be hard and tough, and probably at some occasions you'll think it's fairly bloody. You're no longer...
1 in 6 Sandhurst cadets comes from overseas. Many go back to become not just the military, but the political leaders of their countries.
Two other aspects.
Although Field Marshal Amin of Uganda was never at Sandhurst.
If ever you should feel depressed, remember the thousands who've gone before you. From the famous, such as Winston Churchill, King Hussein, President Garn, and David Niven. So keep your sense of humour, please.
Right, come on now.
The first month at Sandhurst is designed to be the worst.
Look at the heels.
And a number of the carefully selected officer cadets drop out of the course from shock. It's all part of the continuous process of ridding the army of unsuitable material. To come to Sandhurst, a young man needs at least 5 O levels and his fair share of OQs, officer qualities. Although never precisely defined, OQs are the currently unfashionable virtues of leadership, service, sacrifice, and discipline. Virtues rejected, according to an army survey, by most young men with the academic qualifications to become officers. So while Sandhurst is casting its net wider over society, it's still catching some pretty unrepresentative fish. And everything that's done to them in the first month seems to make them even more unrepresentative.
On your heel.
To get 30 men moving together, coordinated, requires at first the shouting out from your instructor. And in the end, you can, just by the words of command, you can coordinate your body in time with everyone else. I think this is the basic instrument of discipline.
Right, when I say move, I want the football team to double forward here. Move!
2 afternoons a week, games are compulsory and regimented.
Double, march, left, right, left. When I say move, I want the hockey team here. Move!
I think that in order to maintain discipline, you've got to have that error of fear behind it, so as to enforce discipline initially, in the hope that eventually discipline will become a natural part of you anyway.
Want to show hands for the football? Too many, hands down. This group here will watch football.
There's no place for individual preference in the first month of the making of an army officer.
Well, you don't conduct yourself in a soldierly manner until you've been sort of bashed by Scots Guardsmen and Grenadiers and whatever.
Stop what you're doing, son. Look, before we start, we want to get the polish really down inside the welts there. Give it a good brush up.
Each day of the first month at Sandhurst still ends with the Shining Parade. The Army recognises that with plastic Sam Brown belts now available, spit and polish is becoming increasingly less relevant. But it's an essential part of the first month at Sandhurst.
You're all suffering the same thing. It sort of smashes you to pieces and de-civilianises you, and then they see what comes out of it, out of the pieces.
I think the young person today wants to be chased about. He comes to those gates and expects to be chased about, and we chase him about. We try to weld him into some sort of a team very early on, because that's going to be the rest of his military life, teamwork. Everyone depends on everyone else. And I think if we can get this lesson across very early, then we achieve something.
Do you enjoy making it hard and tough for them?
Not in the way you asked the question, no. It was very hard and tough when I was a young soldier. And I think back to those kind of things because we're training officers and leaders here. People are going to lead soldiers. And so if they're hard and tough and get it that way from the start, it'll be much easier for them when they meet their soldiers, because their soldiers expect to be led from the front.
The primary reason why a young man comes here is motivation. In fact, he wants the sort of life that the army has got to offer, and he wants to serve his country.
Do you think there's any case for saying that you take these people and make them unrepresentative of society by the training that you do?
No, I don't think so. I suppose perhaps in the old days, as you like to call it, you could say that the officer corps was something slightly apart from the nation. But now, in every aspect of our training, of our life, and of our social life, we're terribly interwoven with society.
I wonder whether you're unrepresentative of the rest of your generation.
It's a very fair comment. You will not, there is no way that a fair cross-section of society is going to be represented in the army officer class. The people that come to Sandhurst all have something in common. And what that is, I don't know, is intangible. But you won't be able to find, as I say, a typical cross-section.
Before I joined the army, in fact, I suppose it's almost a mar on me as far as the army is concerned. I was one of these ghastly things the colour sergeants called long hairs and hair and beads and whatnot, sir. You know, I was just a normal teenage lout almost, I suppose. Not from a bad background or anything, but I was very anti-system at one time.
And I felt, you know, sort of looking out into the wide, wide world, how sort of unfriendly it appeared to be. How nice it would be to go somewhere where you knew that your interests could be looked after by friends, and you'd have sort of friends everywhere, even if you hadn't met them before. That was quite an important factor in going into the army. In fact, my father was in it, in fact, in my regiment, and sort of a certain amount of keeping up traditions.
I can remember when I went back after the first 4 weeks last September. I went back home and I just went down. I forget, it was something trivial. I went up to the city centre for. Went down to Cardiff. And I felt 10 feet tall. So I looked at other young men of my age and I felt, well, you know, could he do it? Could he honestly? I mean, that's only the first 4 weeks. I mean, that's nothing in the whole 6 months. But I felt rather proud of myself that I'd actually done the first 4 weeks.
After the de-civilianisation process of the first month, Sandhurst puts together the pieces of the new military man. He learns to handle a self-loading rifle, and he'll study conventional warfare, with a little of the nuclear, chemical and biological variety thrown in later.
You've got a cocker now, haven't you? You should have left the weaker parts to the rear on that stoppage drill.
The enemy must have that road as a DF task. And there's a minefield astride the road to
At their first military lesson, the streets of Belfast still seem a long way off from the cadets. They learn about conventional warfare in a conventional way.
Tanks could support me from Nook Hill, be firing straight over our heads, and they could
The cadet learns the jargon and tactics of battle and how to think like the commander of a 30-man infantry platoon.
Again, 1 Royal Green Jackets can cover me with their GPM GSFs from Nook Hill, which will be very useful.
Get rid of it, because the photo recognition will pick this up. Look how it shines. Just have a bit of common sense. Now tidy it up. Look at the state of it down at the bottom. Roll up the ground sheet.
For this exercise, they're the 1st Sandhurst Rifles, stationed on the eastern front of NATO, with the communists threatening to invade. After all their early training, it's a first test of their endurance and courage.
I don't think courage can be created on a drill square or on the assault course. But I know certainly when I first go under fire, the feeling's going to be totally different from anything I've experienced so far. And until you've come under fire, you'll never know how you're going to react.
One Sandhurst instructor told me that he was producing managers of violence. But alongside the military skills, there's a more subtle process that goes into the making of an officer.
I think the situation that will most likely face you will be the soldier who doesn't salute you because he doesn't notice you, or because perhaps he deliberately doesn't notice you and he walks past. And the easiest thing to do, of course, is to pretend you don't notice him. But what's the correct thing to do? Definitely, isn't it? Definitely. No need to make a great drama about it or pretend you're an RSM, but you've got to draw his attention to it, and you may do it very pleasantly by saying, "Don't you salute in your corps," or something. But the point is that you draw a little bit on your stock of moral courage, and you say to this chap, "I'm being saluted today, thank you." And of course he gets quite a surprise, salutes you, and you both go on your way happily.
Here, we become leaders because we've shown ourselves as being able to control men and to generally keep a grip of things and do what we're told to do, carry out orders, be successful.
All arrived up on one point.
The classroom commanders come together for their first dress dinner. The Sandhurst process of making an officer is inseparable from that of creating a gentleman. It's not just a question of how to hold yourself and your glass. The social graces will arrive with practice. It's much more a matter of identifying the cadets with a part of the establishment of the state. In an official document, the Army puts it this way. It's a vital part of being an officer, the feeling that you belong to something with a life and a corporate identity of its own. Something more important than yourself that has a claim on your time, your loyalty, and, if necessary, your life.
I also think that there is, and that history has proved this, there is a requirement for a soldier to have something more than purely professional ability and courage. In moments of great stress, there is undoubtedly a requirement for faith. And many of our great leaders have mentioned this, and how, in fact, their faith has been a turning point at such moments of crisis. We're a Christian army, operating on Christian principles, living in a Christian society. And I think it's very important that these young men should appreciate the fact that there is no conflict between Christian principles and belonging to the profession of arms.
The most promising cadets are chosen to bring the Sandhurst colours to the Memorial Chapel for blessing.
love, service, leadership, and sacrifice. In looking to the colours, we're strengthened not only in our immediate brotherhood and comradeship, but by all those who have gone before, those who've made the sacrifice and whose names are inscribed on the walls of this chapel. With all these witnesses to faith around us like a cloud, we must throw off every encumbrance and run with resolution the race for which we are entered.
I don't think that a lot of my generation really appreciate the fact that we've signed on the dotted line that we will die for our country, if that isn't putting it, over melodramatic, but we have. And that is something I think a lot of people just don't really appreciate.
The first phase at Sandhurst is almost over.
And that's the way we want to hold on the playground, just like that still.
There's one more ritual to complete before Sandhurst becomes a rather different place for the new officers.
Form! Correct! Moving in double time! Get your dressing by the centre flank. Remember that 4 or 5 inches extra. Leave your face alone, sir. Come on, make your mind up, sir. One way or the other, decisions. Your life of decisions from now on. You're walking about there like a fairy on a rock cake, sir. Stand still. Stand! Easy! Gentlemen, your day today. It's finally arrived. Everybody will be watching you, nobody else. And remember the impression to create. I'm the greatest officer cadet that ever graced Old Building Parade Ground. Everything before me was rubbish. And now I've arrived. That's the impression to create.
The climax of the first 6 months of Sandhurst is still the Sovereign's Parade. As they have for 100 years, the brand new second lieutenants march on for their commissions. Representing the Queen, Princess Alice, Duchess of Gloucester.
The Royal Military Academy Sandhurst is present and ready for your inspection. May I have permission to carry on, Your Royal Highness, please?
With the regimental band now producing military muzak, the Royal seal of approval is stamped on the freshly commissioned officers. The Sovereign's Parade is a carefully stage-managed spectacular, bringing together the 3 great estates of the realm, army, church, and crown.
Sandhurst! Now! March!
Loyalty, I think it's a sense of belonging to not just the establishment, but to the whole trunk of society.
You're wearing the Queen's uniform and your country's uniform. And you've just got to remember that before you do anything, so you don't let the army down.
You have a lot of pride in what you've achieved, and I think it gives you loyalty in the system which you're now attached to. It's to the actual system that's brought you up to what you are.
I'm amazed at some people when they are totally disrespectful and almost disloyal to their country. And why do if you don't want to be British, why stay in the country?
Their most traditional day of the year is nearly over. The newest subalterns are almost ready to enter Sandhurst's brave new world.
Can I ask you what it feels like now you've been commissioned?
Great, really great. After so much and so much work that we put into it, the final parade has really brought it to a good climax.
What does it feel like?
I think a supreme sense of achievement, and I feel very honoured that I am now part of something that I worked for.
I've been in the army for, 6 months now as an officer cadet, and being an officer is something completely different. It's far more respectable and refined, I think, more dignified, perhaps.
6 months, halfway through the course, you saw the other lot go up, and you thought, well, I'm going to get there. When you do, it's a fantastic feeling.
What does it feel like being an army officer?
Marvellous. Well, it's what I've always wanted to be, so it's...
Why is that?
Because I want to serve my country. I mean, it sounds hammed up in this day and age, but that's what I want to do.
Sandhurst is more than just a military training ground. It also prepares young officers for university entrance exams and converts civilian graduates into second lieutenants. For the newly commissioned subalterns from the Sovereign's Parade, who are staying on to become regular career officers, Sandhurst now becomes a completely different place. There are no more sergeant majors, and they now have their own mess where they're treated like officers and gentlemen. Their instructors are civilians or higher officers, including Captain Mark Phillips, the Queen's son-in-law. But the biggest change of all comes in what they're taught. Now they'll study war and military history, politics and revolution. They're made to think about the Army's role in society and how it might develop.
A soldier is a soldier, and he's not equipped to deal with he can organise, but he's not equipped to deal with the running of a country on a large scale.
How do you feel the army should operate? If there was a complete sort of breakdown in sort of, say, political or economic structure of this country?
They're equipped to do short-term projects like cleaning up Glasgow after the dustman's strike.
And do you feel that's a fit task for the military to undertake?
No, but they're equipped to deal with emergency situations like that, but not as a full-time dustman.
In fact, we have a just government, or reasonably just government, and the process of democracy is such that we, the army, have to do what our political masters tell us.
The regular officers who spend much of their course in a classroom are persuaded to keep fit. Though Sandhurst offers every sporting facility, these days it plays down the formerly favoured pursuits of beagling, stag hunting and game shooting. As the official publication has it, neither skill at games nor influence can any longer win a commission or shelter the incompetent.
To strip it, take off the spring, take out the spring, and that's it. Very simple, very robust.
The officers learn military technology and are introduced to the favourite hardware of the world's revolutionary armies, the Kalashnikov rifle.
Although this one was captured in Korea, there are plenty of them around in Belfast. Very nice to fire, very easy to fire, and most liberation armies, most of the IRA type armies in the world are equipped with this.
The weapon that's most likely to be fired soonest at them is the Armalite.
This one was captured in Belfast in 1973 and has certainly been used in action against British soldiers. This is yet another captured weapon. It's a great weapon. I mean, I would like to own this myself, really. If I was going to buy a rifle, if I wanted a rifle personally to shoot or hunt, this is what I'd go for. It's incredibly light and it's very, very lethal.
Here today we have another of the sad, typical incidents of Northern Ireland unfolding before us. A 15-year-old girl was shot in the eye with a rubber bullet after an incident following a march. Some 50 or so youths broke away from the main march and started stoning troops.
The officers use closed-circuit television to learn the techniques of communication. One officer plays the hostile interviewer, the other the commander on the spot.
Why was a rubber bullet fired at 50 children?
I must make it quite plain that they're not children. I think it's very regrettable that you get a 15-year-old child allowed by them amongst their number.
It seems a very high place to fire it up in the face.
And rubber bullets are fired to bounce off the ground and then at the legs and the lower half of the demonstrators' bodies. which was what was done this time.
The recording is played back to the whole class for self-criticism.
This is Mark Winthrop, first report, Northern Ireland.
Well, Mark Winthrop, interviewer. Would you have been happier if you had been an interviewer with the answers you got?
Yes, I mean, he was sticking to his story. He was saying that this has happened in the past, and these things do happen.
I think I was let off quite lightly in that he didn't press me on any points, because it's a difficult thing to show why you should fire a rubber bullet at one person.
As well as drawing on the lessons of Ulster, Sandhurst training concentrates on Britain's defence role in Western Europe. But the arrival of a group of French officer cadets for a joint exercise on Salisbury Plain presents a challenge. These days, British Army officers no longer learn foreign languages at Sandhurst, but later in their careers.
Vous avez pour mission de conduire votre groupe avec son fardeau.
The combined Anglo-French teams face the task of transporting an oil drum full of sand and 10 men across a ditch using only a rope, a plank, and without falling in.
He's up the top. What do we do now?
Les genoux.
Sur les doigts là. Jetez-moi le code.
The problems of Anglo-French cooperation at a more senior level in NATO are faithfully reflected in miniature by the efforts of the junior military elite.
De correspondre par la parole, mais on y arrive par les gestes.
How do you communicate with him if he doesn't speak any English?
We manage. Sort of, it's a collection. It's a group thing. Someone speaks, and then they all try and decipher it, and then we eventually get the message over.
We all know a bit of French.
But it does sound a little bit complicated. It works very well.
The Anglo-French exercise is a part of the Sandhurst officers' preparation for service in Western Europe. With the last outposts of empire gone, Sandhurst now concentrates its training on NATO requirements and Britain's role in the Western Alliance. But the modern army officer is also trained for possible future action on his own doorstep. If urban terrorism or economic chaos in Britain were to produce a situation that was beyond the power of the police to handle. In a classroom seminar on industrial relations, officers discuss how such a situation might arise.
But basically, the working man of Great Britain is a capitalist. I think that is a fact that ought to be accepted. Unfortunately, within union organisations, the subversive or extreme elements have crept in, which are pushing the thing against its original intentions. And the product of this, ultimately, could very well be a breakdown in the entire system.
The trade unions are going to be able to bring down this country anyway to a state of rubble, and then from there they hope to create a socialist state from then on.
You say there, do you mean that 100% of the trade union actually believe this?
No,
I think what it is
it doesn't need to be 100%.
Well, obviously it doesn't need to be 100%, and I think that the problem which David brought out here is that the communists in the trade unions, and you speak specifically about the communists because their aims are to change the state through any means possible. The communists being the most militant people in the trades union, they hold a disproportionate amount of power to the amount of people which they
But what I'm saying is will they be able to, and I think depending on how much apathy still exists and whenever the country's going to fall around its ears, will that small percentage be able to get away with what it wants to do, i.e.
It's achieving it at the moment.
The young officer's scenario of a breakdown of civil order in Britain is acted out in a remarkable Sandhurst training exercise. Lasting one weekend at the regular careers course, it's an exercise in internal security techniques. It closely follows the counterinsurgency teachings of Brigadier Frank Kitson. The Sandhurst officers arrive at a deserted army camp in Wiltshire, where a sinister picture of Britain in the near future has been created. The official Sandhurst narrative for the exercise runs like this. Economic and political chaos is reigning in Britain due to the failures of consecutive Labour and Tory minority governments. Unemployment is rife, and the richer parts of the United Kingdom are thinking in terms of independence. Scotland has already seceded, and the government has sent the army to deal with the political violence in Ogbourne St George, where 2 policemen have been killed. The presence of the troops in the streets aggravates an already menacing situation. The villagers of Ogbourne St George, realistically portrayed by regular soldiers and other Sandhurst officers, prepare to confront the army. The troops have attempted to adopt a low profile.
Reference message on explosive hanging down.
1-4, this is 1 over.
They set up an intelligence centre and gather and collate every scrap of information to build up a detailed picture of the two rival political factions in the town.
Firstly, the Ogbourne Loyalist Front, who are located mainly in this area here. They are a principally right-wing organisation. They draw their support mainly from the middle-class farmers, and as far as we know, are led by a man called Simpson, who is also the Member of Parliament for Ogbourne. The other political faction is the Independence Revolutionary Association, and they are based mainly over in this area of the town. They are mainly a left-wing organisation who draw their support from the unemployed and the lower classes. And they are led by a man known as Mr. Morris.
My name is Mr. Morris, community leader in this area. Good morning to you, sir. We were having a peaceful evening here last night when this street was literally invaded.
Morris, the leader of the Independence Revolutionary Association, known as Eric the Red, is played by one of the civilian instructors at Sandhurst, as is his main political opponent, the neo-fascist Conservative MP for Ogbourne, Keith Simpson.
Democracy does not come from the barrel of a gun. Democracy comes from you, and I, as your legal representative, as your Member of Parliament, will make certain that you get democracy. Now, we were told a few days ago that if the army came here, law and order would be maintained. The police have disappeared from the streets, and we have these soldiers here, these super boy scouts, who have so far failed to deal with terrorists at the other end of the town. We shall interpret what law and order means.
To discuss the army's problem in dealing with an MP who sanctions political terrorism, Simpson reverts to his role as a Sandhurst instructor.
Now, this kind of terrorism is extremely difficult to deal with. Now, how do you, as members of the security forces, partly you've got to advise a government, handle this kind of situation? Do you use military action? Do you declare martial law and round up these people, deny them their parliamentary immunity? How do you deal with the situation?
The obvious thing to do, though, is to stamp out this sort of uprising straight away.
I don't think you can start taking them on in the political arena and start marching into Parliament and locking up elected members of Parliament. I mean, that's undemocratic. You've got to show yourself to be capable of maintaining law and order, despite what physical measures they're going to use against you, while also politically mature enough to let them carry on with their rantings and ravings in Parliament.
What about the kind of public reaction you get when, for instance, the army's cooperated with the police on exercises at Heathrow Airport to deal with potential hijacking or terrorist activities at shooting down airliners?
They don't like it at all, no. It's once again, it's the problem about putting a tank into Northern Ireland, isn't it, with this new line of vehicles that have come out. Instead of Ferret and Saladin, we've got Scorpion now. You can't put a tracked vehicle into Northern Ireland because of the political atmosphere there. In this country, the presence of a military formation on the streets produces much the same reaction. It's not liked at all, not at all popular.
The threat of civil anarchy in the Ogbourne St George exercise has greatly increased. There have been bomb explosions at the town hall, the law courts and the fire station, killing one man and badly wounding another. The general commanding the troops, played by a Sandhurst subaltern, arrives on a tour of inspection where he's confronted by Eric the Red, leader of the Independence Revolutionary Association.
They wouldn't tell us, would they?
They wouldn't tell us. Mr. Morrison, you must understand that there are some things that the security forces have to do here that, you know, one really can't tell the population exactly what's going on. We are here, as you know, to keep the peace, and we're doing our best.
I said to the young officer in charge of them, I said, listen here, Sunshine, unless you get your people off the street, there'll be trouble, because it's like...
For the Sandhurst officers, It's a realistic exercise in how quickly a situation can escalate and how difficult it is to calm down an angry mob by reasoned argument.
Piss off, Army! We don't want you here anyway. We don't do much that sort of talk.
The exercise is designed to allow the officers to practice the techniques they've learnt of crowd dispersal and riot control.
First thing Tommy went wrong is we went the wrong way. In fact, that's unforgivable, because if somebody had been a matter of life and death, we'd have been 30 seconds late. The chap in the front's not certain. You must take command and get in the front of the wagon yourself. And there were one or two people who went a little too far out and slightly overreacted. The tendency will be is if you overreact in a real situation, that you will come off worse. You must not overreact. You mustn't be drawn into an argument. You must try and pacify them, keep them quiet, and explain to them what the situation, try and explain to them what your job is, and say that providing the situation is quiet, the troops will pull off the streets. But you have no desire to be there when there's no trouble. Right? If you hang around, the moment you sit and wait, you're going to create tension. Do the job and get out of the way.
What do you have to do to prevent a riot situation, do you think?
Well, keep their crowd, keep them on the move backwards.
Don't let them get the initiative. Just keep as calm as you can, I think, perhaps because the more excited you appear, then the more excited they're going to be. If you start running and shouting about, then equally so, then they're going to start running and shouting and screaming and abusing you. So if you play it cool and just try and calm it down and keep your soldiers calm, then have control. One hopefully would hope that it would turn in your favour.
You can't stop and do nothing. You've got to keep on doing something.
Yeah. Even if it's the wrong thing, if you do happen to take the wrong action, as long as you're doing something, positive, you'll probably get away with it.
The Ogbourne St George exercise reaches its climax as a mob from the Independence Revolutionary Association stones the police station and sets it on fire. The troops arrive, and the mob's leaders encourage direct confrontation, conscious of the propaganda advantage they can draw if the army overreacts. So far on the exercise, the officers have encountered no more serious weapon than sticks and stones. But as they advance against the mob, there's the crack of sniper fire. The bloody end of the Ogbourne St George exercise demonstrates the real difficulties of internal security operations. The Sandhurst officers learn there are no easy military solutions to the problems of subversion and civil disorder. And they discuss the historical lessons of military involvement in political affairs.
So you would not then advocate the kind of solution that the French army attempted to in Algiers?
We'll see where it got them. I mean, it failed. Eventually, the French army got to the stage of considering dropping Paris on Paris. Now, there we have the military overstepping their mark politically and feeling they have the right to make political as well as military decisions, which they don't. They're the instrument of the government. The government are not the instrument of the military. And this is why the French lost in Algiers, because the measures they were taking were too severe and politically unacceptable, and the politicians were basically frightened of a military takeover.
So you think then that if you are defending democracy, you accept certain limitations on the way you go about defending it?
Well, I think you have to by definition, otherwise you change what you're defending from a democracy to a totalitarian state.
And the army does today live far more closely with society generally than ever before. And indeed, the officer corps is far more widely recruited than it has been by tradition. The net result of it all is that an officer today must have the ability to interpret his instructions and not just to give them. And all this I think, suggests to me that a young officer must not only have, as always, a sense of loyalty and be able to maintain the highest professional standards, but he's got to be rather more worldly wise than any of his predecessors.
But a number of overseas cadets from Sandhurst have gone on to become military leaders of their country. Do you think that could ever happen here?
No.
The soldiers tend to think politics, that's the job of the politicians. We're soldiers, and we'll get on with our job.
But there's nothing to suggest that we could do a better job than the British government. We've never been in power. We've never seen how the army would actually run the country.
Where else there is an actual precedence for military government. It's never happened in England, not for the past 300 years. It's happened in England. Therefore, we wouldn't know, in fact, how successful an army government would be. So we got nothing to base it on.
I mean, the cause for bringing it in would have to be very great because it would cause a terrific amount of harm, far more than it would in most other countries, because our government is so deep set now.
So stable.
I mean, people say we're only just recovering from Oliver Cromwell.
We're trying to institute something like this would be rather difficult. Discussing it actually, yes, it was yesterday, first two periods, I think, whether the British Army could institute a coup. The very structure of the army, we've decided, won't allow it. We've got, 4 infantrymen here, all different regiments, all wear different uniforms, all have different regimental prides. They probably won't get on with each other when they come to it. So many commitments overseas. If you want to bring in a military power, you've got to bring back forces from overseas. You can't keep up your NATO commitments.
Do you really think our generation of officers, though, is interested enough to start a coup? I mean, interested enough in governing the country?
Well, I think they think the situation's much too complex. As I said, a politician isn't trained, but he's got to gain a certain amount of experience. And we've got a fairly sort of, not difficult task, but full task on our hands, learning how to be army officers. But learning to govern as well might be a bit too much.
For 300 years, the British Army has been the most politically docile military instrument in the world. And much of the present Sandhurst system seems designed to keep it that way. But 6 years in Northern Ireland have given the British Army unique experience in counterinsurgency and internal security techniques. And the Army has learned how quickly it can be sucked into playing a political role as the situation on the ground deteriorates. Sandhurst is now realistic enough to recognise that the Army's Ulster experience could one day have to be used in Britain, and to train officers for the possibility. Among the class of '75, there were none who relished the prospect.